Good afternoon, all. I welcome you all to the second session of the day. Uh, uh, Today we have with us Dr. Naresh Kumar and Dr. N.C. Patra. We can begin with the introduction, sir.
So, very good afternoon to everyone. Now, today we have our expertise, the resource person, Professor N.K. Sood. He is a very nice person and expert in clinical pathology as well as on blood slide and other cytological studies. Now, I request Dr. Now, I request Dr. Kausal Kumar, who is the participant as well as the assistant professor of veterinary college in Bihar. So now I request Dr. Kausal Kumar, please introduce our revered resource person like Professor Sud. Please introduce.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patra. Uh, Good afternoon to one and all, uh, and welcome to the today's session. Also, let us now welcome the man who does not need any introduction and known among all of us for his wisdom and his knowledge. Our honorable speaker, Dr. N.K. Sood sir, Naresh Kumar Sood sir. Even then, I would like to introduce him. He was a professor and head at the Department of Veterinary Pathology, Gadwasu, Ludhiana, Punjab, and he had over 36 years of experience in teaching veterinary pathology with a specialization in clinical pathology and oncology as well. He remained instrumental in creation of best laboratory and teaching facility in veterinary pathology department and in clinical diagnostic at his university. He had extensive research work experience covering major field of veterinary medicine with a special niche for diagnostic pathology and animal cancer as well. Also, he had won several national and international awards, honor, and he has received various recognition from a number of institutions, including ICR Best Teacher Award in year 2017. Sir, you have motivated us by being a living example by sharing your expertise and knowledge among us. I am sure the participant over here also will be benefited. I, on behalf of the organizing committee, now request our honorable speaker to address the session and deliver his expertise and valuable input on the topic mast cell neoplasm in canine. Sir, N.K. Sood, sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushal, for the introduction and talking
So,
and saying so much about me, which really I feel humbled by your this thing. And I'm also thankful to the organizers, particularly Dr. Patra, for giving me this chance for presentation. The topic
sir,
today.
I think you are the legend in cytology, sir. So, participant, I request on behalf of our organizing committee, please listen to him, and I think you should enrich something. Okay, sir. Please continue, sir.
Yeah, actually, what I'm going to talk about is not cytopathology as was shown. It is mast cell neoplasia. Of course, a lot of cytology and histopathology is inside. And through these pictures, I will be demonstrating in general the cytology and histopathology of neoplasia indirectly. So the topic is update on mast cell neoplasia. We want to talk about mast cell neoplasia. It's a very interesting cell, and it's basically from the pathologist angle that we look at it. So can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, yes, we can see you as well
It's
as
done.
hear you.
Okay, okay. So this mast cell is, some people will call it as must cell, is a wonderful cell, has assigned many functions and looks fascinating both at cytology and histopathology, which I'm going to talk about. So if you look at the mast cells, they are important part of the dog's immune system. My topic is restricted to the canines today. And they have a lot of bioactive substances. Some of them are preformed and some of them are formed on activation. For example, histamine, heparin, they are already preformed, and certain things they will be released on activation. They play a lot of role in bacterial, parasitic, and to some extent viral infections, and many more, which I'm going to show you. So this is a simple appearance of the mast cell, which is in cytology, and this is a artistic reconstruction, and this is degranulation on activation, particularly when the IgG are bound to its surface and an antigen comes, then they degranulate and release enormous amounts of histamine as well as other mediators which are responsible for hypersensitivities, particularly type 1 hypersensitivity. In addition to type 1 hypersensitivity, the mast cells also play a role in type 3 and type 4 hypersensitivities. And this is the scanning electron micrograph of the mast cell. So if you look at the kind of bioactive mediators, preformed include histamine, heparin, and so many others, whereas so many cytokines are synthesized by this, and even regulators of immune response are synthesized upon activation. There are certain chemokines which are also activated upon stimulation and which are chemoattractant for other cells for moving in and out of the blood vessels as well as into the tissues, as well as tissue aggregation of cells, particularly the eosinophils. Then there are lipid mediators, leukotriene C, 4 prostaglandin D2, platelet activation factor. There are others such as angiogenetic and lymph-angiogenetic factors, which promote angiogenesis and lymph-angiogenesis. So you have several receptors on its surface. One of the receptor, which is a tyrosine kinase receptor, is a KIT receptor. It's a key receptor which we look for in immunohistochemistry and PCR when we look for the diagnosis of its tumor. So the most important thing is degranulation. When there is a response, there is a either localized anaphylactic response or a generalized response, type 1 hypersensitivity, and then you know this may be release of many factors, including particularly histamine. The mast cell not only interacts with the immune cells like T regulators, B regulators, T follicular helper cells, Th2, Th1, T helper 1, helper 2 type, other T cells, natural killer cells, the innate lymphocyte cells, dendritic cells, macrophages, monocytes, basophils, neutrophils, eosinophils, platelets, all of which are now recognized as part of the immune system through many of those mediators which I have already named. They not only interact with the immune cells, but also mast cells interact with the cells which are not directly involved in immunity. For example, endothelial cells, lymphatic endothelial cells, fibroblasts, keratinocytes, osteoblasts, osteoclasts, cardiomyocytes. There is a special focus on that in human biology. The mast cells, how they help in the after the cardiomyopathies. The neurons, the adipocytes, goblet cells, smooth muscle cells, bronchial epithelial cells, and so on and so forth. And thus, the mast cell is involved in epithelial integrity, endothelial functions, neurological activity, microbial defense, particularly against the parasites, fungi, bacteria, and some viruses, tissue remodeling, of course, immune regulation. One of the key questions which students, because it's a student's time, so I'm going to talk about differences between basophil and mast cell. And I didn't want to put this slide, but because it's a session especially for the students, so I thought that it should be important one for differentiating the two. If you look at the size of the cells, the mast cell is relatively much bigger, about twice the size of that of a basophil. Basophil has generally a round shape, whereas the mast cells may slightly be elongated or oval. The nucleus is lobulated. Generally, in the basophil, we have either 2 lobes or 3 lobes, lesser than those of the neutrophil. Whereas the mast cell has a single round or roundish nucleus. I won't say round, it's roundish nucleus. If you look at the number of granules, there are lesser granules in the basophil as compared to mast cell, which is more or less packed with fine granules. And they are going to more mask the nucleus than that of the basophil. Cell borders, if you look, the cell borders more or less are smooth in case of a basophil, whereas they are rather erratic. They are not that regular. You can see some bumps there. And if you look at the lifespan of basophil is just a few days, whereas the lifespan of the mast cell could be pretty long, maybe months or up to years. If you look at the origin of the mast cells are unique in the sense that they are not released in fully differentiated form into the circulation. Rather, they are released from the bone marrow as undifferentiated progenitor cells, and then they move on to the tissues where they finally mature. That's something unique about the mast cells. And mast cells are found in almost every tissue of the body, particularly around the connective tissue, near the epithelium, and surrounding the blood vessels. So mostly they are found in open systems, let us say GIT, respiratory system, urinogenital system, under the skin. So these are the main foci, but you can find mast cells in kidney, liver, pancreas. Of course, spleen, lymph nodes, they are always there. They can be anywhere. Odd mast cell can be anywhere. They are even in the bone marrow. It is only so from the bone marrow, they move in an undifferentiated form into the tissues where they finally mature and preform their mediators, which are released if the need be. And when they proliferate in abnormal numbers, that becomes a mast cell tumor. One of the key characteristics of a tumor is unregulated proliferation or immense proliferation. Means you are adding the number of cells, you are adding the mass, you are making a nodule there. And this is the cytology and this is the histology. You can see enormous number of mast cells, and you can again see very huge number of, because normally they will be scattered here and there, just one or two. So then we go to the topic proper, mast cell tumors in dogs. Why I have chosen this topic is because the mast cell tumor is a clinician's dilemma because of its tumor biology, which is very heterogeneous. It can be a single tumor or it can be many tumors. Most of the times it's in the subcutaneous tissue, maybe in the dermis or just below the dermis in the subcutaneous adipose tissue or the fibrovascular area or into the muscles. This tumor many a time reoccurs after surgery. That is also something very serious. It may not look that serious, but yet the reoccurrence rate is quite high, particularly in certain sites. And the tumor behavior, the biology would vary depending upon the anatomic site. For example, in the scrotum, it's always serious, it's always more aggressive. Mammary gland in females, we reported a case of that. I'll show you later. So there also its behavior is more malignant or aggressive. In the oral cavity, its behavior is very aggressive. Particularly in the nail bed or interdigital area, again the behavior is aggressive. Mucocutaneous junctions, the behavior is different than elsewhere. So this aggressive behavior in certain sites and not so aggressive behavior in other sites makes it an interesting study material. And if you look at the growth rate, it's not same always in this tumor. It is variable. Sometimes it's almost looking like an area of allergy or very indolent or very quiet. Sometimes after a quiet period, it starts abruptly becoming rapid, or it can be rapid from the beginning. So there are several variables in the growth rate. That's why this is a typical clinician's dilemma and needs a lot of attention. So if you look at certain basic aspects of mast cell neoplasia, these are very common in dogs, probably one of the most important skin tumors. Incidence is about 20% out of all the skin tumors, and out of all the malignant skin tumors, the incidence is 11 to 27%. Interestingly, the mast cells also vary in shape, size, and appearance. It can be either they can be benign or they can be highly malignant, and they can spread to regional or sentinel lymph nodes, liver, spleen, bone marrow, and even other organs. These are the most important sites for metastasis of mast cell neoplasia. Prognosis in general is dependent upon the location, as I told you, the grade of the tumor, histology of the tumor, cytology of the tumor is very important. The stage of the tumor and the treatment, what treatment has previously been given. The appearance of the mast cell tumors, as I told you, is quite variable. Mostly they are located either just below the epidermis into the dermis or the subcutaneous adipose and muscular tissues. They can be either single, at times multiple, and if the dog is having hair coat, the owner, once he is just putting his hand over the skin, he may feel a mass or multiple masses. The lumps may vary in appearance from wart-like mass to the soft lipoma-like mass, and sometimes it's ulcerated. So there can be single tumor, there can be multiple tumors, there can be ulcerated tumors, may look like papilloma, may look like lipoma, that's again a clinician's, or may look like just allergic reaction. So that's why it is very interesting tumor, and that was one of the causes why I picked up the topic. Risk factors of mast cell tumors. Mast cell tumors, they can occur at any age from somewhere 4 months to 8 years and above, but most of the tumors are seen in middle-aged dogs and above. As early as 4 months, reports are there. Generally, 6 months onward, there are many reports, and around, say, 5 to 10 years, there are large number of reports. And if you look at the breed predisposition, the breeds with the small head and neck, they have the small neck, they have the more incidence. The retrievers, particularly the black Labrador retrievers and the golden retrievers, they have the highest incidence. Sharp eyes also have high incidence. And this incidence will also vary according to the geographic location, because the breed, how you are rearing the breed, that is different in different locations. For example, what we see in a particular area in India may not be the same, or what we see in the US or Canada or UK, that may not be the same breeds in India. So that's why the incidence, breed incidence, I tell my students, when you are looking at something, you must see which breed is being presented. For example, in our place, about 50% of the dogs that are coming, they are Labres or they are retrievers. So naturally the incidence will come much more in this breed. I have seen most of the cases in this breed, which I'll also show you some cases. So most of the tumors are located either on the trunk or in the perineal area around the anus. 40% are found in the legs. Some may be found in the paws. 10% are found in the head and neck region. That's the general predisposition. But the other common or relatively less common sites are oropharyngeal, mediastinal, TNS, nail bed, ocular, periocular. And as I told you earlier, the metastasis can always occur to lymph nodes, liver, spleen, and bone marrow later on. So as we have more metastasis, the stage would also increase. The well-differentiated tumors, that's very important, the size, may have size up to about 3 or 4 centimeters in diameter. So once the size is more, then the next stage approaches. And an interesting thing is that 20 to 40% of the mast cell tumors would reoccur, particularly in American bully breeds. So even if you treat them with surgery, that is the mainstay of the treatment, which I'll show you, they will, the tumors are likely to reoccur in 20 to 40% of the cases. And I showed you right from the very beginning, there is a degranulation of the mast cells when an antigen tags on to the antibody attached to the surface of the mast cell. And when a lot of histamine is released, there is a lot of inflammation, there is a lot of congestion, there is edema, so the tumor suddenly swells. One of the very important clinical signs of the mast cell tumor is that it is fluctuating in size. So sometimes the owner would say it becomes big, and then maybe within few days it becomes small. Again, it becomes big. So that's what we call as waxing and waning. I also told you that there may be a slow growth or indolent behavior, and later on it may start rapid growth. Redness, erythema, edema, all they are seen in most high-grade tumors. There is itchiness and inflammation because of the histamine. The lymph nodes adjoining the tumor or sentinel lymph nodes may be enlarged. Similarly, if you do the abdominal ultrasound, you will find the liver and spleen are enlarged. There can be loss of appetite, vomiting, and or diarrhea depending upon the stage of the disease. Sometimes you also get the vomitus with blood or feces with blood, and this is basically due to GI ulceration. So here you can see that thickened gastric mucosa and ulcers. And it has been seen on postmortem GI ulceration, those dogs which are dying of mast cell neoplasia, 35 to 83% of the dogs may have GI ulceration, particularly in the stomach. And another key sign of this disease is swollen, itchy, red skin due to scratching and stroking by the dog, by the feet. So this is very common sign, not only near the tumor, maybe distant sites. So this is what is known as Darier's sign. If you look at the etiology and pathogenesis of mast cell neoplasia, the etiology of mast cell neoplasia, as for most other tumors, is largely unknown and speculative. I already told you that breed predisposition is already there and told you about retrievers. They have germline risk factors predisposing to mast cell, which have been well identified through the genome-wide studies. I also told you about the tyrosine kinase receptors, which are present on the surface. They have mutations or changes in about 25% of the dogs with the high grade 2 or grade 3 tumors. A number of mutations, 8, 9, 11 segments of c-KIT have been identified. This c-KIT is like a growth factor receptor which controls proliferation, migration, and differentiation of the mast cells. So once this regulation is over or it is mutated, there is a continuous stimulation, and that's why there is a continuous proliferation or uninhibited proliferation leading to mast cell tumor. Also, the microRNAs have been detected. MicroRNAs are involved in post-transcriptional modifications of the transcription RNA, or in RNA silencing, they play a role. So the altered levels of these miRNAs have been found, leading to the defective epigenetic regulation or protein formation. Similarly, DNA hypomethylation has also been detected in these tumors, particularly in high-grade tumors, thus epigenetic misregulation. In cancer, both the genetic dysregulation as well as the epigenetic dysregulation, particularly in the promoter and enhancer sequences, is there. So if you don't change the gene itself, you change the promoter or the enhancer, which is not directly the gene, but regulating or upregulating or downregulating the gene expression. That's what is known as epigenesis. So let us look a little bit about the c-KIT or the KIT tyrosine kinase. It has got an extracellular domain. This is the normal. And the exon sequences here are 1 to 9. And then we have just across the membrane, the transmembrane domain, where this exon sequence is 10. Then we have close to the inner membrane, the juxtamembrane domain, which has sequence 11. Tyrosine kinase domain 1, which is 12 to 14. And tyrosine kinase domain 2 is in the sequence 16 to 19. So mainly these sequences somewhere from here to here, particularly 8, 9, and 11, they are important. So a normal or a low-grade mast cell tumor will show the expression immunohistochemically on the membrane itself. That means all this is intact. Its membrane domain is normal, or its extramembrane extracellular domain is somewhat normal. That is why it is showing expression on the surface of the kit. Whereas when there is a change in high-grade tumors, this is expressed either in a patchy or focal form within the cytoplasm. See those dark areas in the cytoplasm. The expression has shifted from the membrane to the cytoplasm. And in very high-grade tumors or aggressive tumors, it is just in the cytoplasm in a big way. You see here it's patchy, here it is diffuse cytoplasmic brown color, which shows that the expression has now totally shifted to the cytoplasm. And that's why there is no domain like this transmembrane domain or extracellular domain. And thus what happens, the cell is continuously under stimulation and proliferating, because without even stimulus by the growth factor or the mast cell stimulating factor, it is still growing and proliferating. And it has been seen that if there are c-KIT mutations, then the survival is very short. Whereas the cells, if they don't have c-KIT mutations, they have pretty long survival, those dogs. The tumors with those dogs, they have a much longer survival. So this is the survival index. Diagnosis of mast cell neoplasia. This is one round cell tumor apart from other round cell tumors, which are the TVT, the lymphoma, the plasma cell tumor, histiocytic tumors. So this tumor can be easily diagnosed by fine needle aspiration. It's a very easy to diagnose tumor on fine needle aspiration, unless it is highly aggressive or highly malignant or very high grade where there are no granules. Because of the granules, and these granules can be easily stained by most of the Romanesque stains, particularly by the right stain or right Leishman stain or right Ginza stain or May-Grunwald stain. All stains can identify the granules. And these cells I showed you more or less round. And the granules are metachromatic, means when you stain with the toluidine blue at a pH of about 1 to 2, then the nucleus stains differently and the granules stain differently. The nucleus would stain usual blue with the toluidine blue O, whereas the granules stain purple. I'll show you that. And granules are basically intracellular, or when you make a slide, some of the cells may rupture and they may go in the background. And if the tumor is highly cellular, you may get a lot of cells there degranulated, or you will find the granules in the background. Generally, granules form a halo around the relatively irregularly seen nucleus, which is not so clear. And these nuclei are rather more seen at low power. Another interesting thing is that there is a role for eosinophils and basophils. I told you that mast cell has a eosinophilic chemotactic factor. I told you that chemoattractants or chemokines. So what will happen then? A lot of eosinophils are attracted to the tumor, and that also shows that the tumor has been there for a long time, and also that has role in the prognosis of the tumor. Sometimes when eosinophils come, some basophils may also come to the tumor. For grading, cytology may be good, but histopathology is the best for grading of the mast cell tumors. I told you these metachromatic granules can be well identified with toluidine blue O stain. And there are there are two grading systems for the mast cells. One was given by Patnaik in an article in Veterinary Pathology in somewhere 1984. And another was added, which is more recent, by Kupel in 2011, and which was recognized by the Pathology Oncology Group in 2013. So as per the Patnaik, there are three grades: grade 1, then there is a grade 2, which has A and B, high grade 2 and low grade 2. So you can say 2A low grade 2 and high grade 2 is grade 2B. And then we have grade 3. So this system was slightly confusing, as I told you now. You might have got a little bit confused when I said that A and B. So later on, Kupel modified this into simply high and low grade tumors. And that's why that is more recognized. And it has been seen that cytograding, if you try to grade on the basis of cytology and compare with the histopathological grading, it has been seen the concurrence between the two is somewhere between 80 to 95% by different workers. So that means cytology is pretty nice in predicting the grade. I'll show you the pics. So this is a low grade tumor. You can see the nucleus is more or less obscure. The cytoplasm is having too many fine granules. The borders are irregular. And that's another situation where there is a degranulation. You can see the nucleus is almost not seen. And they are loaded with granules. And there are granules in the background as well. Now this is a poorly granulated mast cell tumor. See, here the granules are rather sparse. In this cell there are some, here there are fewer ones, here there are yet fewer ones, and the nucleus also becomes prominent in turn. And you can see the cytoplasm becomes, the nuclear chromatin rather becomes more coarse or ropey, and the cytoplasm becomes clearer. And the next step, this is the most difficult one to recognize on cytology. Here, this is highly walled or aggressive tumor, and you can see these cells are looking like histiocytes or any other round cell tumor, let us say TVT cells, except for the vacuoles. And the nucleus is very, very prominent and hyperchromatic. And there are the euchromatin and heterochromatin areas alternating, making it stippled. I told you about eosinophils. This is on cytology. You can see the mast cells as well as large number of eosinophils. Look, this is eosinophil, this is eosinophil, this is these are all eosinophils around. And there are fewer mast cells than eosinophils. But look, The tumor cells are always much bigger. They are 3-4 times bigger than the eosinophils. So can we do grading by cytology? That was the question. And I'm going to answer it right here. So here you can see the mature mast cells and very well granulated, masking the nucleus. And here you see they are moderately granular, and there is much more pleomorphism. Here there is little pleomorphism. These sizes and shapes are similar here. Here they are quite varied. You see this is too big. Here the nucleus is becoming indented and granules are much lesser. And even binucleated cells come into play. So binucleated cells would indicate that it's a more aggressive tumor. Similarly, if you look at this, there is a mitosis, and you can see these cells have fewer granules, very few granules, and the nuclei are quite pleomorphic. The nucleoli are also becoming prominent. The nucleus is stippled or coarse chromatin is there, and there is a lot of pleomorphism. This cell, can you see those nucleoli? That's a prominent big nucleoli. There is a small. So not only one nucleolus, there can be multiple nucleoli as the tumor becomes aggressive. And similarly, you can have the giant cells in an aggressive tumor. So you can see a multinucleated giant cell here, which is an important way of differentiating between high and low grade tumors, particularly by the Kupel method, which was given in 2000, recognized in 2013 and given in 2011. So here, this is a well differentiated tumor. This is moderately differentiated, and this is poorly differentiated. That's why I'm showing you all three together. This one would be resembling more or less a histiocytoma or TVT cells. And this one is easy to recognize. And this one is with little difficulty you can recognize. But this one is certainly tough. So as I showed you, most of the tumors can be diagnosed by cytology. And if you are able to diagnose by cytology, it takes only, say, 35 minutes to 1 hour, depending upon how quickly they bring the slide and how quickly they stain the slide. Otherwise, it takes only half an hour. And is this anatomic site amenable to wide surgical excision? Can we do a wide surgical? Because that's the key. You have to get away from the lesion by about 3 centimeters. So you should have a wide area of excision. If you can do that, and other negative prognosticators are there, their negative prognostic factors are not there rather, then excise with the wide surgical margins and submit for grade and margin assessment. So this can be done. And then you have to follow it up at every 3 months till 18 months. After that, 1.5 years, you have to follow it every 6 months and look for the lymph node enlargement, etc., or reoccurrence. So that's done. So a low-grade tumor in a site where it can be excised with wide margins is having a good prognosis on surgery. Whereas if it is not amenable to surgical excision or the negative prognostic factors are present, then you have to go for mostly incisional biopsy. Incisional biopsy is when you give an incision into the tumor, don't remove it in toto, just give an incision and take a piece for biopsy. And take a lymph node aspirate from the adjoining or the draining lymph node. This is must. Maybe lymph node is not enlarged, still you have to do it. Then you have to do abdominal ultrasound for liver and spleen. and you may take a liver and spleen aspirate for mast cells. You can do CBC chemistry. You can do certain cytokines and for histamines, and you have to do the Buffy coat for presence of eosinophils or mast cells in the smear, in the blood smear. And then you have to look for a high grade tumor. So grade 1 is well differentiated, behaves benignly. Grade 2 is of intermediate differentiation, but behavior may vary. So low grade would even behave benignly. Whereas high grade, this is as per Patnaik, which may have KIT mutations, will behave more malignantly, so it's almost equal to grade 3. Whereas grade 3 will be highly anaplastic and aggressive behavior. So this was the Patnaik's 3-tier system. Whereas the Kupel modified it and he gave a 2-tier system, which was recognized in 2013 by the Oncology Pathology Working Group meeting. So grade 1 has clearly defined cytoplasmic boundaries with regular spherical or ovoid nuclei. Rare or absent, there are no mitosis usually. Abundant, large, deep staining cytoplasmic granules. So this is the key for grade 1. For grade 2, the features are closely packed cells, much more number of cells with indistinct cytoplasmic borders. Nuclear cytoplasmic ratio is rather decreased, and there are frequent mitosis, more granules than with the grade 3. So if you compare with the grade 3, there are more granules. If you compare with the grade 1, there are less granules. Grade 3 is highly cellular, frequent mitosis. There are too many mitosis. Undifferentiated cytoplasmic, because cells are so packed that you can't differentiate between their boundaries, and their boundaries are highly irregular or bumpy. The nuclei are highly pleomorphic. They are hyperchromatic. They have coarse chromatin. Nucleoli may be prominent, and there may be very few cytoplasmic granules. In addition to that, when you do the grading, whether the tumor is invading into the deep subcutaneous tissue or fat or the muscles, that is a common feature of grade 3 tumor. It's not restricted tumor, it's rather deeply invasive into the adjoining tissues. So based upon the number of mitosis, whether it is less than 7 or more than 7, presence of multinucleated giant cells or binucleated cells, bizarre nuclei, irregular shape, I showed you indented nuclei, and big nuclei, all these features that will differentiate if there are more than 7 mitosis, if there is a presence of multinucleated, bizarre nucleated, binucleated nuclei, coarse chromatin, prominent nucleoli, big nuclei, hyperchromatic, all those features, very few granules, all will make it a high grade rather than low grade Kupel mast cell tumor. So this grading system given by the Kupel is more precise than the one given by the Patnaik. So this is a well circumscribed tumor, mast cell tumor. You can see it's and it is not invading much, and you can see the adnexa and the overlying stratified squamous epithelium is there. But this tumor is now deep into the adipose or subcutaneous tissue, and you can see there are tributaries here and there. The tumor cells may be here and there. So naturally, when you try to incise this tumor or excise this tumor, it will be much more difficult. If you don't leave those margins, then you are leaving those cells intact. You may be thinking the tumor is here, mass is here, but it may have already spread to the adjoining vicinity sites, and this more happens under the influence of chemokines, because some cells, when they migrate to the periphery, then they release more chemokines which attract more tumor cells, and that makes a secondary tumor cell mass. So this is a typical pattern of well-differentiated mast cell tumors. They are either in ribbons or in rows. They are simply rows or ribbons. But if you find more groups like this, that means it is slightly more aggressive. And you can see the inherent congestion and hemorrhage, they are going to come into play because it is going to produce vasoactive amines. And this is the kit labeling, and it is mainly on the surface in these two well-differentiated tumors. This is slightly less differentiated than this. And you will find the expression is mainly on the membrane. I told you that. So again, let us look. I'm going to repeat it. The grade 1 well-differentiated mast cell tumor. The grade 2 moderately differentiated, the cells here are rather in groups. They are not, and you can see the pleomorphism and the placement of the nuclei, the size of the nuclei, the nucleoli, the chromatin all have come into play. So this is becoming a grade 2 tumor. And now this is grade 3. Here you can see a lot of mitosis. These are mitotic figures. These are mitotic figures. There are so many mitotic figures. So that indicates, we call it as, if you count those mitotic figures and quantify them, we call it as mitotic index. So here you can see a lot of mitotic figures, and there can be atypical mitotic figures. Normally, in a typical mitotic figure, in the two sides of the spindle, two poles of the spindle, you will find the similar chromatin, the same amount of chromatin, and it's a very nice looking mitosis. But if you have on one hand more chromatin and on the other hand less chromatin, that's atypical. Or you have 3 poles instead of 2 poles or 4 poles, that's atypical mitosis. There can be something like pre-mitotic figures or atypical mitotic figure likes. Eosinophils also play a role in the diagnosis. And you can see the binucleated cell. You can see the nuclei are quite irregular. So nuclei and nucleoli may be quite prominent and irregular. So here, a low grade versus high grade tumor, according to the Kupel, is very simple. So here you can see there is a packing of the mast cells which look almost similar to each other. But here you see there is a lot of variation in the cells. And the granularity is very low in the cytoplasm. And see, this is totally different. And there are some nuclei which are very big. And see, there is a giant cell. So when you see a giant cell, tumor giant cell, in a mast cell tumor, that will always indicate a high-grade tumor, as is in the difference between a connective tissue tumor, which is just a oma or a sarcoma. So giant cell is an important differentiation. Some people call the mast cell tumor as mast cell sarcoma as well. Also, the amount of connective tissue is important. And look at the kind of connective tissue here is too much. That means it's a more aggressive tumor, lot of stroma. And look here, how many cells are there and how much connective tissue it is imbibing or stroma. And after the toluidine blue O staining, you can see the mast cells are packed and the connective tissue is somewhere in between. And that is also playing whether it is invading onto the muscles it is how much connective tissue it is invoking or stroma it is producing, and how many number of cells are there, all the other features. These are the features added to those nuclear and cytoplasmic features. As you all know, that Ki67 is a feature of proliferation. It is a immunohistochemical marker of cell proliferation apart from PCNA. The PCNA is not as good a marker as Ki67 of proliferation. So this is used in many of the tumors as a proliferation marker. And here you can see a low Ki67, only one cell out of this. And here there are so many cells. So which one? This one is much more malignant as compared to this. And then the silver nucleolar or agyrophilic nucleolar organizing regions, which are stained with the silver staining. So if you have just one in a cell, that's low aggressive. Whereas if you have too many of them, for example, here, multiple AGNORs, this is much more aggressive or malignant. So if you try to quantify it, there can be tumors with the Ki index less than 23 or more than 23. So the percent mortality is much higher, which have Ki67 more than 23. This has been demonstrated and quantified, and this has been documented by many workers. Similarly here, if the AGNORs into Ki67 is more than 54 or less than 54 or more than 54, it is more than 54. You know, when you multiply the two things, that becomes even more important when you join two factors together, or when you determine the ratios, that becomes a more sensitive parameter as compared to when you analyze just a single parameter. So let's try to sum up this discussion on the grading. Location for grade 1 would be generally dermis or interfollicular spaces, means just superficial area of the subcutaneous tissue. Whereas grade 2 will be going into the subcutaneous or muscles or adjacent tissues. Grade 3 would be mainly in the subcutaneous and adjacent tissues. It will be highly invasive there. I've shown you some example also. Cellularity here is rather low. It is naturally, this is proliferating at a low rate. This is proliferating at a moderate rate, so cellularity is more than this, and it is highest in grade 3 tumors. Distribution of cells, either rows or ribbons, or in small, here they are much bigger groups. And here they will be almost sheets of cells. Pleomorphism. Pleomorphism means variable morphologies, sizes and shapes different, will be low in case of grade 1, will be moderate in case of grade 2, and intense in case of grade 3. Cytoplasmic characteristics, distinct boundaries with abundant granules. Grade 2, most distinct, but some with fine granules and some with indistinct borders, with large and hyperchromatic nuclei and granules. And here the borders are indistinct with few granules or no granules. Nuclei will be round with condensed chromatin here. Nuclei are small, they are not visible. Here round to indented with scattered chromatin. Here indented or vesiculated or open nuclei, they have much more open chromatin than the heterochromatin. Nucleoli not evident. Here there may be single. Here there may be multiple. I showed you the example of AGNORs, which represent basically the nucleoli. Edema and necrosis, here there will be minimal, here there will be diffuse, and here it will be common. Here it is, sometimes it may be there, sometimes it may not be there. Binucleation, here it is absent, and in this, the last grade is common, and here there may be occasion. The giant cells are rare or absent, here they are common. Stroma, here there is hardly any stroma. Here, because of the production of angiogenetic factors and lymphangiogenic factors, there is a thick fibrovascular stroma, and sometimes that gets hyalinized. I showed you examples. And here it is even more thicker. Mitosis per high power field. Here it is absent, here it can be 0 to 2, here it can be 3 to 6 or even more. So we have finished diagnosis and grading. Let's go to staging for metastasis. Staging is different than grading. Grading is done on the basis of histopathology or histology or cytology. The appearance of the cells under the microscope, whereas staging is done how much spread, what is the size of the tumor, whether it is fixed or it is movable, fixed to the adjacent tissues, immovable, or it is movable, whether the regional lymph nodes are enlarged or not, whether the inner organs, internal visceral organs like liver, spleen, they are enlarged, they are involved or not, bone marrow is involved or not. All those factors will determine the staging of the tumor. So staging is usually not done for grade 1. If you see by histology, the grade is very, very important. It has to be done before stage. And if it is grade 1, you don't need to do staging. Staging is less important for very high grade mast cell tumors because we know they are high risk. They are going to spread you whatever. There is no effective treatment in the long run. Let us say you can't increase the survival by a few months, more than a few months. So what you do here is just palliative treatment. You give antihistaminics, you give steroids, you give anti-inflammatories and all that. So you may try chemotherapy and radiation may not work. Cure is likely not, especially for grade 3 tumors. The staging most important for single low grade 2 that is not resectable. You can't do the resection because you need wide margins. For example, if it is present near the eye, then you cannot cut it off because you will damage the eye. So naturally, what you will do in that case, you will do the staging and try to determine butt west we can do. So if staging is clean and there is no metastasis in this tumor which is not resectable, then we do the radiation. Also, consider staging for poor prognosticators prior to surgery. For example, aggressive locations, I told you nail bed. I told you many other, the mucocutaneous junctions, the muzzle. I told you several areas, scrotum, nail bed, muzzle, mucocutaneous junctions. Also, you have to look for peripheral blood or visceral mastocytosis. There is a stage when there is mast cells everywhere in the body. We call it as visceral mastocytosis. And even they enter the bone marrow and the peripheral blood. And what that will do, that will reduce the number of normal cells in the bone marrow or will cause cytopenias. For example, there can be leukopenia, there can be anemia, there can be thrombocytopenia because of the replacement or myelopathy caused by the mast cell tumor. So if you try to determine the different stages or classify them, stage 0, microscopic disease only. Stage 1, so you don't see any gross appearance, you see some allergy kind of thing, and you pick up the FNAC and find a few mast cells. Stage 1, tumor confined to the dermis. Stage 2, tumor does not infiltrate the subcutaneous tissues, but the adjoining lymph node is enlarged. Stage 3, large infiltrating tumor or multiple tumors, either one large infiltrating tumor into the subcutaneous tissue, adipose tissue, muscularis, etc., with or without lymph node involvement or enlargement. Stage 4, distant metastasis, including blood or bone marrow involvement, and that can be easily done. I'll show you some pictures. And then stage 4 has been further divided into A and B. In humans now, they divide almost every stage into A and B. So if you have systemic signs of, let us say, vomiting, anorexia, malaise, weakness, hematemesis, etc., etc. So that is indicating that it is stage B. If it is not, then it is stage 4A. So certain mast cell tumors are non-resectable. You can't do much surgery because, for example, this tumor may be fixed to the underlying mass, underlying abdominal tissues. So what will happen then? You can't do much surgery. You will damage so many tissues in the process. And if you do it, and here it is on the eye, and here there are so many tumors, how many surgeries you will do? For determining the stage, you have to do the histopathology. If it is a resectable, you first remove the tumor, do excisional biopsy. If it is not, do an incisional biopsy. Difference is only that you give a small incision and take out a small piece, let us say about half a centimeter or 1 centimeter, and do a histopathology on the same. You do the fine needle aspiration of the draining lymph node. That is much better than histology. Histology, you can't do that easily. And you may find mast cells if there are a large number of or clusters of mast cells or groups of mast cells. That indicates mast cell metastasis. But single mast cell may not indicate metastasis. Similarly, you do abdominal ultrasound or FNA of the liver and spleen, and you can do abdominal radiographs for their enlargement, particularly when the mast cell tumor is on the back side of the body, because then likely the liver and spleen may be involved. Thoracic radiographs, if the tumor is on the thorax or the cranium, it may rarely spread into the lungs. For example, here it has already spread into the lung. Normally it doesn't, but here. You can do CBC to look for the mast cells, and Buffy coat will indicate how many mast cells are present in the blood smear. And this is Buffy coat is also known as poor man's bone marrow. And finally, you can do the bone marrow aspirate, which we have done in many cases, and we had I was involved in several theses. And here, the determining the stage of the mast cell tumor, I am going to show you one by one pictures. So common sites for metastasis would be the sentinel, the closest lymph node. So here you can see there are only few lymphoid cells left. Most of it is replaced by poorly granular mast cells. They have replaced. And this is in the spleen. You can see there are a large number of mast cells in the spleen. And this is in the bone marrow. There are 2 mast cells apart from the normal marrow cells. These are the erythrocyte precursors. These are the white blood cell precursors. These are the mast cells. See, when you're looking for the metastasis of the any tumor, epithelial tumor or mast cell tumor into the regional lymph node or sentinel lymph nodes, you have to look for the drainage point. For example, if it is here, then you will look for mostly the popliteal lymph node. For example, if it is near here on the neck, then you will look here. If it is somewhere here in the thoracic, early thoracic region, or if it is the hind region, then you will look here. So it all depends upon where the tumor is, and this picture shows you the different segments of the lymphatic drainage, how it drains into the various lymph nodes. They are shown by different colors. So here there is just a single mast cell in a lymph node, which is basically hyperplastic, and you can see a Mott cell there, and you can see several plasma cells and many blast cells, lymphoblasts, and there are small lymphocytes as well. And this single mast cell would not qualify to be a mast cell tumor in the lymph node. Whereas when you have groups of mast cells, or like this, or like this, there are just few lymphoid cells. Mast cells, even binucleated cells there, and nuclei are quite prominent, and they have very coarse chromatin, and there is a very irregular erratic behavior of the cells. They show a lot of pleomorphism and atypia, and some of the nuclei may be even bizarre. They are not regular shaped. So all that would indicate a metastasis. Mast cells in large number have no business in the lymph node. They are foreign to the lymph node. So these are the cases which were good enough to be presented here. I have some cases. I had seen maybe many cases of mast cell tumors, and some of the cases I am showing here. And this was a golden retriever. We usually would find them in the golden retrievers or the black labras. And this was 3.5 years. And this was from a Chandigarh owner, and he was a hi-fi owner, and this tumor reoccurred. First, the tumor was somewhere there, which which responded well, and the second tumor reoccurred on the tail. And slowly, as we progressed, this is a sharp eye, and you can see there are multiple tumors on the limbs, on this limb, and this limb is highly swollen and edematous, and there are multiple tumors, and lymph node was also enlarged. So here, this is lymph node aspirate, and this is the tumor cytology, and this is lymph node aspirate already into the lymph node. And on HE staining, you can see there is a lot of fibrovascular stroma. There is a lot of stromal reaction, and there are a large number of small eosinophils in comparison to the mast cells, which are big ones. It's a low power view. And this is toluidine blue, which is showing you the large number of mast cells, and eosinophils remain unstained. You can see in the background the lobulated cells, which are quite small, and they are basically, presumably, eosinophils. Now this picture shows you a glance of the lymph node metastasis, and you can see how the nucleoli multiple N-isonucleolosis. We call it as N-isonucleolosis. So you can see there are multiple irregular nucleoli which are small and large, and they are misshapen. Nucleus may be round, oval, elongated, spindle, but the nucleoli always are rounded in a normal cell, if they are at all visible. But in a cancer cell, these nucleoli may become morphism. And this is a typical metaphase spread of the chromosome, which shows you a mitotic figure as a mitotic figure. And this was a unique tumor. I showed you the case of the Lebre. And what we found, that there was a reoccurrence on the tail, and later on we started finding cells in the blood. So this is in the blood. This is the nucleus. It is not a lobulated nucleus. The cells are much bigger. So there were large number of mast cells in the blood. That meant that the tumor had already reached the bone marrow, and that's why it is a last stage. And this honor followed for about an year, and after that the dog died. And this is how you will do the staging of the tumor, step by step. So first you will see the original tumor, then reoccur tumor, and then the lymph nodes, and then the blood, and then go to the bone marrow, liver, spleen, and try to find the stage. This is an oral mask. This was in the ear, the mast cell tumor. And then there was a mast cell tumor reported by us in a female Labrador. That was in the mammary gland, which is a very rare location. We had previously also seen a mammary mastocytoma, which we didn't report. So I also showed you that this eosinophilia associated in the tissues as well as in the blood. So in the blood, you may have eosinophilia. You may have in the tissues large number of eosinophils. You may have in the lymph node eosinophils. You may have eosinophils at the tumor site. There can be just one eosinophils or many eosinophils. For example, here those small ones. So all that comes under paraneoplastic syndrome or paraneoplastic hypereosinophilia associated with mast cell, and that is a bad prognostic indicator. So let's try to sum up the prognosticators of mast cell neoplasia. Histological grade. I have already stressed too much on the histological grading system, 2-tier and 3-tier systems. Clinical stage, whether it is small or large enough, or multiple or single, or firm and fixed, or it is movable and not fixed, or it is into the sentinel lymph nodes or multiple lymph nodes, or it is into the visceral organs or bone marrow, all that. Location. I have already given a lot of insights into the location of this tumor. Systemic clinical signs, I have already told you that malaise, anorexia, vomition, diarrhea, hematemesis, blood in the feces, and so on and so forth. Generalized edema, a lot of allergic reactions on the skin. Reoccurrence, whether tumor has been a recurrent tumor or the original tumor. Tumor size, I have already given you an indication, 1 to 3 or 4 centimeters and beyond, generally beyond 3 centimeters in dia. Mitotic index also I gave you the idea. So people have tried to determine the prognosis by picking up the Patnaik grade and adding to that the KIT mutations. So in grade 1, Patnaik, they try to correlate the frequency of this was about 8 to 53%, and the KIT mutations were very few. Whereas in grade 3, the histological abnormalities were seen in 59 to 76%, and the KIT mutations increased. And in Patnaik grade 3, again, you can see the histological grade frequency of this was little lesser. This was less presented. So maximum they were presented in this grade, and in this grade followed by least were in this grade. And because it has grade 2A and B, I told you, that makes it complex. That's why we went into the Kupal system later on. And here you see the KIT mutations are maximum in grade 3. And here the survival time is very little for 12 months, 1 year. It's about just 16 to 46% of the cases. Here this is about 87 to 92% of the cases they may survive, particularly with grade 2A, where here 12 months survival you can predict in almost 100% of cases in grade 1. Similarly, in the Kupel system, if you go, the histological frequency of this was in about 59 to 89% cases. That will come around 70% average. And in this one, the frequency is 11. That will come to about 25%. And the KIT mutations are much more here. And see here, the probability of a 12-month survival was about 95%. And here, there is a much more, here the median survival was rather 2 years. And here in this, there is an increased chance of metastasis and survival will be very less. So, when you try to determine the prognosis, low-grade tumors will do better than the high-grade tumors. That's already evident. The tumors that have spread throughout the body, they carry the worst prognosis or a serious prognosis. Location, I already told you, scrotum, nail bed, muzzle, mucocutaneous junctions, they will carry a worse prognosis than rest of the locations. Systemic signs indicate a worse prognosis. So complete surgical removal or with good wide excision would be much better. Mitotic index I have already indicated. So if you try to believe on this Kupel type of system, then we have a two-tier grading system. So if we have mitotic index less than 7 or we have mitotic index more than 7, that's the basis. So you do Ki67 and AGNOR, and if there are low counts of these, no additional testing is required. If you have higher counts of these two, then you will go to either IHC for c-KIT or tyrosine kinase receptor, or you will do the exon sequence PCR for 8 and 11. And here, in this case, similarly, you will do the same if it is a high grade. So ISC pattern 1 or 2, I have already given you an indication. There will be some chemotherapy which will respond well. Whereas ISC pattern 3, where there is, I told you that ISC pattern 3 is when the diffuse cytoplasmic. ISC pattern is 1 when there is a surface membranous expression, and when there is a focal cytoplasmic or patchy cytoplasmic, that is type 2 pattern. When there is a diffuse cytoplasmic expression, that is a pattern 3. If there is a pattern 3 yet there is no KIT mutation by PCR, then you will go for chemotherapy only. If you have ISC pattern plus c-KIT mutation, both of them by PCR, as well as the pattern is bad, then you have to go for this tyrosine kinase inhibitor, which is a very expensive therapy. It is around $100 per tablet, along with the chemotherapy. So something about the surgical margins. As you all know, when the tumor is growing on the periphery, there is a vascular supply, there is a neoangiogenesis, there is a production of new vessels, and this is particularly promoted by angiogenetic factors produced by the mast cells. So there are new capillaries which are immature and they don't have enough stroma or the perivascular support. And here, inside the tumor, deep inside, in the center of the tumor, there is a zone of low oxygen or stasis, because there is a pressure from all around. There is a centripetal pressure there. And what that will do, these cells, the tumor cells, are likely because the tumors will spread onto the adjoining tissues from here. And these capillaries, they also become en route for further metastasis because these capillaries are immature. So more mast cells will enter and go to distant sites. So, for example, here, this is a gross description which shows the skin and then the fascia and the muscle. And this is a tumor, mast cell tumor, and has seeded into the muscles. Can you see? And it is also seeding somewhere there. See the whitish patches, the whitish areas. And here on histology, if you mark these margins with some ink, let us say India ink, then you will find that these margins are unclear. This is very important when you do a tumor histopathology on a slide. You have to look for whether the margins are clear or unclear. So this is the invasive front if you have taken from the periphery of this tumor, the section. If you have taken the section from the periphery, and if you find margins like this, they are unclear, that means your removal was imperfect. So that is why, while removing a tumor, you have to give a wide excision, say about 2 to 3 centimeters away from what you see with the naked eye. So value of histopathology in tumor diagnosis is immense. Of course, initial diagnosis, it is cytology, which is exceedingly important, but added to that histopathology. And with histopathology, you can do the best grading. You can determine the mitotic index. You can determine the surgical margins, clean or dirty. You can determine the invasiveness, whether this is invading into the subcutaneous adipose tissue or the muscles. So histology tells a great deal about prognosis and treatment indicated for mast cell tumors. And staging will tell you just about prognosis, but less about treatment, unless a single unresectable low-grade mass, for example, near the eye may be present. So last segment of this lecture, the treatment, it is actually beyond our purview, but still I have to mention because many times when we are working with oncology, I know people will come and they will ask what treatment has to be given. And we were also giving treatments, and I'll show you some therapies which we were also giving. So mast cell tumors will be preferably treated with surgery if it is a low-grade tumor and resectable. And I have told you that wide margins. Radiation or chemotherapy may be recommended depending upon the grade of the tumor. So goal of treating the mast cell tumor is to control the local disease, prevent the systemic signs, and metastasis if possible. So surgery is the mainstay of the low-grade tumors, and it is in about 80% average, it's successful. So you can see this is a tumor, small tumor, and you have wide margins and do the surgery. But supposing it is a big one, so always diagnose by FNA before you excise. Leave the margins 2 to 3 centimeters. If it is too small, you can reduce the margins. Always never handle the tumor too much. When it is a malignant tumor, if you handle it, the cell shower, the tumor cell shower, you are going to seed the cells into the lymphatics, into the microvasculature, and they are going to spread and there will be metastasis. So you are in fact encouraging metastasis if you manipulate it too much. So if it is a large tumor, first try to reduce the swelling by giving prednisolone for about 2 weeks, and then you can do the histology. Chemotherapy, either there is a traditional chemotherapy like vincristine, but later on they started doing this vinblastine plus prednisolone combination. And even later they found this, they added cyclophosphamide to this. So if you do this cyclophosphamide, vinblastine, and prednisolone therapy, that will work better, it has been shown. And these are very expensive tyrosine kinase inhibitors, probably in Indian, maybe in Bombay like or something, daily people can afford it. Radiation therapy is just of face value. Probably one of the clinics in Bombay, they are doing some radiotherapy on canine tumors. So 80 to 95% curative at 2 years if low-grade non-resectable mast cell tumor without distant metastasis. If it is non-resectable and high-grade, then you can do only palliative radiation therapy. You can reduce the size, prolong the life, that's all. You know ultimately it is going to stop. So finally, there's a focus on mast cells and their role in tumorigenesis. So far, we have been talking about mast cell tumors. At the end, we are talking about whether mast cells have a role in the tumor regression or tumor progression. That's a very big question, and this question is getting a lot of attention these days. And in many human tumors and in canine tumors, the mast cells have been found, and we too did some study on the mast cells in the tumors. So mast cells can either be anti-tumorigenic or can be pro-tumorigenic. They incite angiogenesis, tumor growth, metastasis, promote metastasis. Whereas they may cause favorable prognosis or decrease the size or cause immunosuppression or other things. And this is more complicated little. So here you can see there are so many things, TNF alpha, the reactive oxygen species, the histamine, heparin, interleukin 9, all they may be helping in the tumor. But look at the other side. There are large number of interleukins, cytokines, or vasoactive factors which are promoting the tumor growth. So by and large, if there are mast cells present in the tumor, maybe later on we may come with the the macrophages, the type 1 macrophages and type 2 macrophages in the tumor, or some promote and some demote. And same way we may come up later on in terms of mast cells, some promoters and some regressors. Or in general, so far what is known is that mast cells, they help in the progression of the tumor to a bigger extent than regression of the tumor. So this is a nice artistic reconstruction of the mast cell there, and this is the connective tissue, and it looks like the waves of the water. And thank you very much for bearing with me. I don't know how much time I have taken.
Thank you, sir. Dr. N.C. Patra, are you there? Hello?
Hello?
Just a second, sir.
Hello?
Yeah, just a second. Dr. N.C. Patra joined us. Just a second. Dr. Patra, you may, the presentation is finished. Hello? Dr. Patra, can you unmute yourself? Hello, Dr. Patra. Hello. Hello, Dr. Patra, are you able to hear me? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. I think it is now audible, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes. Please continue, sir. Dr. Patra,
Yes, sir.
yeah, please, you can proceed to the formal vote of thanks.
Okay.
So if there are any questions,
Yeah,
you
if there
can,
are any questions, please
yeah, if
ask.
there are any questions, you can ask
Sir,
me.
very much
Mostly thank yous are there in the chat, sir.
our legendary Professor N.K. Sood, sir, who has completed his entire life and worked on this cytological study as well as the blood slides and the hematological study. So today we have got our legendary figure like Sir Professor Sood to our training program, sir. Today he has very elaborately has given his observation on mast cell tumor. We all have gone through this, and even he has given the very nice pictures which are very much useful to our UG, PG as well as the teachers, different teachers of various universities. We are, sir, very much thankful to you, sir. And lastly, I would say you have given very information, very needful information of today's importance, and your slide interpretation will give us a very beneficial for the diagnosis of the disease, specifically for the tumor detection. So today, sir, we are very much thankful, and we are really happy to be with us, and students and participants who are always with you, sir, for to learn from you, sir. So really, we are very much thankful to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Patra, and thank you all other organizers. Actually, no names were provided to me, so I don't know much about that. But anyhow, I'm thankful to all of you, and particularly the students. I don't know how many were there. That's a problem with the Google Meet, so I could not see much, interact much. If there are any questions, please, you're welcome. If there are any questions by the students, I would see that there are some questions because that means you have understood. Otherwise, you have not understood. I have failed to make you understand something.
So participant from participant corner, please raise some questions before our professor, sir. So please, participant, please do the needful.
So, is there any participant sitting or all of them have gone? हेलो
हाँ सर.
बैठे हैं सर कुछ के सब भाग गए हैं
नहीं सर, है सर. All are present, sir.
ओके
So
ओके
thank you, sir, for your kind cooperation, sir. We all seek your kind cooperation in near future also, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much again, and I wish you all my junior colleagues and budding pathologists and all best of luck and uh, best time to come forward for the new endeavors and whatever help you need from me, you're always welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Stay well, sir. So participant can leave now. Tomorrow we will tomorrow, no, Monday we will meet at 11. Okay.